Hello and welcome to the True Worth podcast. I'm Monique Beadles and today my guest is Clare Huxley, Director of Gov Partners. Clare is an award-winning professional and is highly regarded for her ability to deliver transformational change in the digital areas of the planning, building and infrastructure sectors. Clare was formerly a senior executive at Infrastructure New South Wales and the New South Wales Department of Planning and Environment. She currently splits her time between New South Wales and Queensland. Welcome, Clare. Lovely to have you here today.
Thank you, Monique. It's a delight to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, no, wonderful. Now, as I've mentioned, your business is called Gov Partners. Would you like to just tell us a bit about how that name came about and how you got started?
Yeah, sure. Hopefully the name Gov Partners kind of speaks for itself in terms of what we do. I wanted to make sure it was a name that wasn't overly complicated. So look, it was essentially born out of a need to provide a different kind of service to government. My background is 15 years in government, so I've got a lot of experience in that space, and I recognised that there needed to be a service really that was purpose driven and also partnership focused, as opposed to what I kept on seeing, which was very much profit driven, and then also a relationship which was very much them and us. And I just felt time and time again that this type of approach just doesn't work. Nobody actually wins. And when you think about the public value, the public purse, I guess for me and my values, that's where I felt like there was an opportunity to actually do something quite different. Hence one of our, I guess, hashtag marketing is do things differently.
Yeah, excellent. So you saw an opportunity, I guess, there to do something that was a bit different to what you'd seen in the past. So the partnership approach that you talked about, what is it about that you most enjoy?
There's a lot of things, to be honest, that I really enjoy about taking this partnership approach, but the really big thing for me is, I suppose, if I have to pick one big thing, is that it is that one team approach. So it's everybody together around the table. I find that really integral to the success of projects because it enables the different points of view. Also, the fact that different people have different experience and different knowledge as well, and they're exposed to different things and different lived experiences. So for me, that's what I really like about partnerships, is that it is that one team approach. And I do truly believe that it does lead to better outcomes at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So what do you see in terms of the value that approach creates, I guess, for both for you and for your clients or for others that you're working with? How do you see that, or how would you describe that value?
Yeah, well, I just mentioned then about better outcomes, and ultimately at the end of the day, I feel like when we do expend any effort, time or money, it should always be about delivering better outcomes at the end of the day. With the partnership approach as well, I do truly believe as well that there will be time and cost efficiencies in the long run. And I think that's really important. Again, this world that we're now living in, we need to be really careful about how we spend our time and our money. I also really like what happens at an individual level too, in terms of how, when you bring different people in together and their mindset gets opened because they get an exposure to different types of people. And I think it also helps as well, we all have our blind spots. So I do feel as well, when you do create that environment of that one team approach, that, you can have those courageous conversations and, ask people would they do things differently, and have the courage to have a different conversation with them and see where that may take things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And obviously we're in quite a demanding economic environment at the moment, where we really have to make sure we're getting the most from every dollar that we're spending, and particularly from the government point of view, there's a lot of scrutiny on how taxpayers' money is spent. So, I mean, do you think that there's an increased need for this sort of approach at the current time?
Absolutely. And I think we're really starting to see that in New South Wales. Even today, I just sat on a webinar around the movement in place framework. Yeah. And that's come from Transport for New South Wales, but they certainly haven't delivered that in isolation. They've worked with other government agencies, they've worked with local councils, and they've worked with the private sector and NGOs. So you're really starting to see now a new model, I guess, that's emerging, where everything, I think, really is starting to come together, where people do believe we can't do it on our own, or if we can, we'll be limited in what we're able to deliver.
Mm, mm. Yeah. Do you think that sometimes people have a tendency to undervalue that taking that partnership or a collaborative approach if they do tend to think that they can do it by themselves, or that they don't need to necessarily collaborate?
I do think so. I think sometimes there's a bit of an attitude that it'll take too long or it'll cost too much money. Or that saying, it's like herding cats. The reality is there's a lot more planning that needs to go up front in terms of making sure that you've got the right people around the table.
Yeah.
And also as well to really truly understand what is it that is the problem that you're trying to address. Is that actually really the problem? And that's why having a partnership approach in place can really make sure that you actually are answering the question that needs to be answered.
And I guess also considering that full range of stakeholders that need to be a part of that process.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. So what might be some of the risks from your point of view? I mean, if there's a reluctance, sometimes it's because people are afraid of, negative outcomes. What are some of the realistic risks that people need to consider, do you think?
Look, I think probably the skeletons in the closet is probably the big one, to be honest. When you are taking a partnership approach, you've got to put all your cards on the table. You can't really hold anything back. If you do, it's going to come back and bite you. So I think it's having that strong leadership in place and having that, I guess, that authorizing environment, as well as the right setup for the operational aspect for you all to work together and be honest about where you're at, what's happened to date. And also what that will do as well is it will start to build trust as well amongst everybody who is involved. But, there still is always risks with projects. Absolutely. You still get people that will revert back to a default state of a way of working that they feel most comfortable with, a way that may have served them okay in the past. It could be a way where for some people they still have a silo, I guess, interest.
Yeah. Yeah. And are there any sort of, I guess, things that you do up front to try to minimise those risks?
Look, for myself with Gov Partners, I always make sure I'm involved at the start of the projects that we take on. And for me, that's really to build that relationship from the outset all the way through to then making sure that the project's good to go to keep on running. And I still stay very much involved, albeit sometimes I might be in the background. Some of the projects I'm actually leading, depending on what it is and what the client needs. But yeah, it is really important that you you do stay focused.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I suppose that you'd also want to be seen as a partner of choice or someone that people can come to when they are looking for support or help in these areas. Does it, I mean, given that there's some times where you feel like maybe you've been underestimated or people didn't quite see the value that you could bring?
I wouldn't say underestimated. I'm sure there's been times in my career where I may have been underestimated, probably more so in the early days when I joined New South Wales government. I guess I was a young female from the UK, not native, had done a bit of backpacking. So obviously that probably went against me a little bit as well. And, I remember standing in a room with a bunch of certifiers, trying to convince them that they needed to move their practice online.
Yeah.
And, there were some very difficult conversations and, obviously people didn't want change and they often thought that I was crazy. Whereas you look now and, it's the minority that are not working online.
Yeah, for sure. There's really been a shift, hasn't there, in the recent years, I guess, especially through COVID. But
and I think
yeah.
I just want to say the funny thing is as well is that I still know a lot of the certifiers as well. Like they still give me a call every now and then. They still like to keep in touch. And I think what's happened there is, where I've been underestimated in those early days, now there's the respect there, which is really good. And I would say to anyone in any role where you feel like you're underestimated is to just stay the course and stay focused. And it's about, I guess, the long term, not the short term.
Yeah, Yeah, definitely. And I often say to people, I think if you do feel you're being underestimated, perhaps like you've described, maybe when you're younger, or perhaps you're seen as an outsider in some way, then, harnessing that determination to say, okay, well, I'm going to stick at this and I'm going to do well, regardless of what people might say. And eventually, that serves you well. So,
Yeah, definitely. But I think it's also important as well, like if you do feel like you're being underestimated, don't be defensive, and just take a step back and actually listen to what's being said, because you can often find that, there's nuggets of gold in there that you can actually use to your advantage. So I'd say keep an open mind and take what you can from it, and, have that conversation with that person as well. Find out why they think the way that they do. It could be something as simple as a miscommunication.
Yeah, and quite often, perhaps we just haven't taken the time to develop that relationship in the ideal way.
Yeah, or some people may, they may have an idea about how they think things should be done, and they're questioning why you're doing it this certain way. Whereas I think it's important to take time out to have those conversations, and explain, look, there was a range of options and this is the option that we went with, and these are the reasons why. Because sometimes you can be privy to information, especially in the government space, that others are not privy to, and that's for good reason.
Yeah, and how about when, an idea that you might be wanting to propose is something a bit innovative, or something that, is outside what people might have seen before, then, obviously, I guess, putting across the value of that idea can be challenging too.
Absolutely. I think most of my career in New South Wales government was doing that, to be honest. Constantly delivering innovative projects and having conversations with senior stakeholders and trying to, I guess, persuade them to, again, do things differently, and I guess support me and give me a chance so we could actually deliver.
Are there any particular sort of tips you have for anyone who is trying to promote an innovative idea and is coming up against this, that's a little bit too out there?
Look, I think you've got to break it down. You really need to think about what you can do maybe as a pilot from the start, so it limits the risk. There's a concept, I guess, that's used in my stepson's school called flearning, which is failed learning.
All right,
and it's something that I wish was around every school, to be honest, and even in the training courses that we do as adults, because what I think it does, it will give people confidence to actually have a go, whereas I feel sometimes some people are just too afraid to have a go, or they talk themselves out of it. Or you have the opposite extreme, where some people are quite forthright in what they think needs to happen, and it's not necessarily that that's a bad idea, but just the approach that they're taking has just been too much, and what that does is it gets people offside. So it's about finding a nice healthy balance, and also showing like how you are de-risking things. And of course the pilot is one of those approaches where you can de-risk items. And also trying to draw on international case studies as well. I always try to draw around what's happened overseas. I think that's another good way to actually try and open someone's mind to doing things differently.
Yeah, definitely. So we can learn what's happened in other countries, also in other industries or other sectors. Sometimes that's valuable too. We don't always look outside our own little window, but we can learn a lot from what others do.
Like I think of in the ICT world, where we've had agile for a long time, you now hear the word agile in nearly every industry.
Yeah, definitely. So I mean, borrowing things from another place and trying them out it can be a good way to go. So just thinking about partnerships and maybe thinking about outside work. Obviously running a small business, it's quite demanding on your personal time. And I mean, I know very well how much, after hours and long weekends that can take. So how do you balance those demands of running your business with your own personal life and your other commitments, and I guess your own health and well-being as well?
Yeah, look, I think For me, I've always operated one single calendar. So both private and personal commitments all go into the one diary. I've never truly believed in the whole like work-life balance, because work has always been really important to me.
Yeah.
So what I have always tried to do is balance items. So I may start work early because I'm going to go for a walk at lunchtime, for example, and I, might want to take that little bit longer. Or perhaps I'll exercise in the morning and then I'll work through lunch. So I always just try to manage my time around what I've got on that particular day or that particular week.
Yeah.
It also helps to have a really good support network as well.
Yeah.
I'm quite fortunate that I've got a partner that is very supportive, and we very much are a team. Yeah. I also delegate where I can as well. So I've got 2 little dogs, and so if it makes sense to get the dog walker to come around and walk the dogs one particular day, then I'll obviously make use of that as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, and I don't feel bad about that. The dogs enjoy walking with Maxine. They're really happy. It's just really important to be organized and to be realistic about what you can and can't do, and where you do need to I guess get some help and some assistance. I'm guilty of, I suppose, working on weekends. People say you shouldn't work on weekends, but for me that's where I have a lot of my creative thinking time. And I feel like if I didn't do that, then I think it would be a different type of business that we're running.
Yeah, and you do need that personal space, don't you? Or that bit of time out when the phone's not going to be ringing and you haven't got other meetings, where you can do a little bit of thinking and, as you say, a bit of creative space. That's important to keep things going. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and also I guess one of the things that really helps me creatively, I should say. Sorry. You got the usual, obviously you go away on holidays, you go a weekend away, etc. You go for walks in parks near the ocean. But one for me that really, really helps with my creativity is actually attending different networking events, talking to different people and listening to them. And also going to events that are, I guess, just outside of our discipline as well, because it just really opens up your mind. And for me, that's where I really feel like my creative juices get going.
Yeah, definitely. So it's being that and actively learning, or being open to, learning from a whole range of different contexts is important for that. Yeah.
And also reading as well. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that are listening that spend a lot of time reading. I'm just getting into podcasts myself.
Oh, yeah, well. Good.
Yeah. And in all honesty, I don't watch TV, which I think helps me, to be honest, because I'm not fixated on watching, I guess, the next show in a series, for example, or a set TV show that I need to watch each particular week. So I find that gives me a little bit more time as well. Yeah, definitely. And then when it comes to podcasts, that's something you can listen while you're driving or when you're walking or cooking or what have you. So yeah, that can be another opportunity to kind of double up the value of the time you're spending. So yeah, that's a good one to try. So you mentioned about delegating, and I think like delegating is really important in terms of us focusing our time on what we can create the most value from, while perhaps delegating some of those other tasks that others might be able to do. But from the point of view of your team members, how do you support them in terms of managing their work and personal commitments? Yeah, with their team, I'm very much about making sure that they know that their health and family comes first at all times, because I truly believe if they're in good health, both physical, mental health, and everything's good at home, then they'll bring their best self to work. So for me, that's the starting place as opposed to the work. Yeah. And I'm also very mindful as well in terms of the projects that we take on, not spreading ourselves too thin, and also making sure that there's a gap as well for the staff in between projects, just so that they can have a little bit of time to themselves and to reset without jumping into a new project the next day. I think that's quite dangerous to do that.
Yeah, definitely. It gives them that bit of time to digest and to refresh, and then
Absolutely, yeah.
be more focused on the new project. Yeah.
Yeah, we also, with our clients as well, when we finish the projects, we always do a reflective piece as well in terms of lessons learned.
Mhm.
So it's good for both the client and for us. So again, the staff member needs time to really take a step back and really reflect on, what's happened in that project, and so that we can take those learnings and improve for the next time.
Yeah, definitely. So looking back on what you've done over your career so far, Claire, you've had some senior executive roles, you've worked on some big projects, you've started your business. What do you think's your greatest satisfaction in what you've done so far?
Oh, I wondered if this question would come up. To be honest, it's probably been the people that I've worked with, having the opportunity to help them with their careers and seeing them go on to do amazing things. I think for me, that's where I feel like I've created the biggest amount of impact. Because, of course, when people go on and they go into different industries and different roles, I guess the way that I like to work in terms of how I've shaped them to operate, they then take that into all of their new job openings. So I think that's probably one of my greatest satisfactions. And I think the reason why I think that as well is because I still keep in touch with many, many people that I've worked with over the years throughout my career. And they'll keep me updated on roles that they're looking to go for, or the work that they've done in their jobs and what they've achieved. And so that for me, it's that, I guess, that feedback cycle that keeps coming through, that I can be really proud in terms of how I've helped them to operate, I suppose.
So it sounds like those relationships and those partnerships are really core to what you see as important in the work that you do. And so yes, it's a good alignment and a good fit with what you've already talked about so far.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, excellent. Now, how about for others who might be listening, who might be considering doing a similar thing in starting their own small business or a professional practice of some kind? What sort of advice would you have for them?
I would say to them, know your why. Why is it that you want to take that step? And what is it that you think you can actually offer that's going to be, I guess, different to what's already out there as well? For me, when I looked, I could see there were, lots of other companies that I liked, but there were things that I just still felt were still missing, which is why I felt there really was and is an opportunity for Gov Partners. So I think that's really important, is to know your why, and also be really honest with yourself if you have the discipline to take on the challenge of a new business, especially a small business. And also financially having the funds, to be able to ride the waves. So for us, we started over 2 years ago now, just as COVID was kicking off. And of course, we didn't know that COVID was going to happen. No. And of course, the borders closed. That interaction with people moved online rather than face to face. So I had a lot of challenges with it. So for us, that was our first year of operation. So I feel like we got through that. We can get through most things.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So I think you also need to make sure that you are a person of resilience as well. So, when things don't go as well as you would like, just being able to bounce back, I think, is really important. And also, I guess, not to take yourself too seriously as well. Like, you should be having fun when you're doing these things. If you're not, then I don't really think it's something you should be doing. I feel like you should be really happy in your work. You spend so much of your daily life working that, you want to enjoy yourself. And I think one of the beauties of having your own business is you get to work with people all the time that you really like.
Yeah, you get to have a bit more choice over that. So so you may as well make the most of that. I think that's important, isn't it?
Yeah, I literally had this conversation with one of our clients yesterday. It's good working with them.
Yeah, that's great. And so personally, from your own point of view, if we think about true worth and what that means for you, how do you embrace your own true worth?
Look, I think I've always had a pretty good understanding of who I am as a person, and I've always been very confident. I think that comes from my upbringing in Liverpool in the UK, where you are surrounded with a lot of people who aren't shy about giving you feedback, shall we say? Let's call it friendly feedback. So I guess what that does is you're growing up in an environment really where you're quite happy to take feedback. You don't take any offense to it whatsoever, and you feel that you, I suppose, can go out there and conquer the world because you have such a great support network behind you, and you've been raised to believe that you can be anything you want to be. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, I do strongly believe it's my upbringing, and I also believe obviously my parents as well.
Yeah, excellent. That's fantastic. Now, Claire, if anyone who's listening is interested in perhaps partnering with you or potentially working with you, how can they find out more about Gov Partners and how you can help them?
Yeah, look, obviously we have a website, so it's govpartners.com.au. We're also on LinkedIn and also on Instagram and Facebook, which is where we share more of our day-to-day content, what we're up to, the more, I guess, the more fun stuff of what's happening. But yeah, I would encourage anybody listening who would like to know more about who we are and what we do to give us a call. More than happy to have a chat. There's no obligation whatsoever. Obviously, we'd like to try and help you. And if we can't, I'm sure there's someone that we can recommend that can help.
Yeah, fantastic. And you mentioned that you're off to a ball tonight, so that sounds like a fun activity, and that networking and connection that you talked about. So I hope.
I was just going to say, it's the Planning Institute of Australia Queensland Awards evening, so we're not up for an award or anything, but yeah, it'll be really good to go along and just support the nominations and have a good time.
Fantastic. Well, I hope you'll have a great night, and thank you for taking the time today to have a chat with us here on the True Worth podcast. And for those of you listening, if this has piqued your interest, then I'd love you to join us in the True Worth community, where we can share ideas, insights and inspiration. You can find us at trueworth.mn.co. Thank you all very much.